August the 30th, 2019. Guys, you're looking at some impressive satellite imagery. In the bottom right, you have Hurricane Dorian coming in. In the top left, you have one of the factors, this storm again coming over Oklahoma, north of Texas. And we have a high-pressure system that's in the northern Atlantic. The longer that high-pressure system remains in place, the further south that Dorian will be pushed. But in these images, you see that eye develop even from the furthest out satellites and that are looking down on this planet. And then this close-up. Look at that, guys. Now, the hurricane hunters' last report is still showing at 110 mile per hour, but they're either going through it now or getting ready to go and do another pass, I think. That's going to quickly bring this thing up to a Cat 3. Visually, you can already tell it is, and possibly approaching a Cat 4. The information is still holding at 110 mile per hour sustained winds, but that was an earlier air flight. Look at this. Amazing. Now, backloaded system, guys. The heat's been building up. We haven't had storms come through and release any. So now this, backloaded system is going to be a lot of storms, most of them strong, that will be working to release this heat. So again, look at that. Guys, Florida is no place to be. But if they're, again, the latest report or the earlier report from hurricane hunters at 110, guys, 111 miles an hour is a Cat 3. So it was only 1 mile away then, and there was no eye formed. And look at that. It's beautiful, but it's devastating. Remember, Cat 4's catastrophic destruction of homes and infrastructure, flooding, high winds, and the parts that are hit the hardest will be unlivable, uninhabitable for weeks to months. And as we slow this thing down and take a look at it. Now, again, you've got that system coming off the U.S. coast, and the high pressure that's above this storm now, as long as it remains in place, it's going to track south and west. But if the high pressure system eases up in the, again, northern Atlantic above here, that will allow this system to move further north. That pressure won't be holding down on it. But again, still, this was an earlier advisory, and they actually get the speed, the actual true information when they fly through it. But it was at 110, 972 millibars and dropping in pressure. Movement has slowed. Notice that 10 miles an hour now. System off of Africa, 5-day outlook, 30% chance of development. Tropical wave is moving westward from the coast of Africa. Some development of the system is possibly early next week over the eastern central tropical Atlantic. Now, depending on that same high-pressured system that I'm mentioning holding Dorian in place, if it moves up, that storm behind it may track into the Atlantic. Now, looking at this map, probably the next update, guys, we'll be seeing a Cat 3, and you can tell it by that eye wall. Now, the most popular models, if you combine them, it goes up the center of this cone. Now, but remember, this cone is not the size of the storm, although it's going to be a large one. The path of the center could go from anywhere below the Florida Keys up into the Carolinas. That's what that means. And you're looking at some of the models from Sky Tower. This is 12 p.m. updates. Notice the Navy model now is keeping this storm offshore, the center of it offshore, until it gets into just north of the Florida and South Carolina border along the coast. Now, we're going to look at all the models. You still got a couple bringing it into the Gulf of Mexico itself and different models. But anywhere from, according to the cone, it can go from Miami up north. Now, this is a combination of all the models. And if you look, there's 1, 2, 3 in the top right that take this thing straight up into the East Coast. And that would be if that high-pressure system, guys, in the North Atlantic moves further north or moves further east towards Europe. And some of these other models would come into play at that time. It's very thick as far as the modeling, from, say, just south of Lake Okeechobee all the way into the curve, which is in the Atlantic, guys. But we definitely see a hit in this section of Florida. So as a Cat 4, again, catastrophic. Several models, if you count them, I think there's about 17 or 18 of those, take this thing into the Gulf of Mexico. And we know from Ivan and Katrina and some of the other major storms, at the last minute, these things can take a turn. But if you just add in a couple of the most popular models, including the Navy models, the first Navy model does not touch. It goes right up until it hits at Savannah, Georgia. See that? Then the second Navy model is the green model that turns it very quickly, Navy GM and Navy G2. Now, if you go into your AP models, they're still showing this thing going into the Gulf and coming up through the Panhandle. AP 19, AP 18, AP 17, there's 16. One of the, I think 13 or so, or 14 turns it up. See that? So there's still models that they're watching that cover this entire area. And it always changes up into the last day. And then it can change in the last few hours before landfall, especially the Gulf of Mexico. We've seen these storms come in, guys, and the top of the storm catch the edge of the shore. And because of the counterclockwise rotation, it will pull the storm back to the right. It's natural physics. But again, you got about three models that show, and what they did, and when they put the data into the computer on these, the XTRP and the other two, is put into the modeling that the high pressure system over the Atlantic moved north and east. That's what they're watching as far as a really big determining factor. And you're going to have to add in the system coming in over Oklahoma and Texas. But when you look at that eye, guys, you can't play with this. Again, don't even think about staying on the boat. And you really don't need to be anywhere in the area. We're watching it. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe.